Thank you very much, Dave. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I'm conscious that I stand before you and your lunch, so I will try to make my point quickly. So today I'm presenting new result on the PTB PTS attack. So that was first designed when I was at INRIA finishing my PhD, and it was first meant for IPsec, and then it was extended by Vincent Roca and Seiku Fall mainly to encompass additional tunneling protocols. So basically during my talk, what I will present is what is a packet too big, packet too small problem in networking in general. Then I will show you how it affects tunneling channel and tunneling protocols, how to exploit them, and finally I will conclude with some thought of how we can mitigate that. So first, a bit of networking knowledge for those, I suppose most of you have that, but the pure principle of tunneling is basically you just put a packet into another one. And one of the downside of this encapsulation is it means that you had an extra size for the new header, which is usually called outer header H in this slide. And one of the problem is suddenly it may collide with what we call maximum transmission unit. So basically it's the fact that each link has a physical limit to what it can transmit. So usually for Ethernet it's 1500 bytes, it can be more, can be less depending on that. So one of the thing introduced by IETF is what is called pass MTU, is basically the minimum MTU of all the links that are along a path between two hosts. And basically what it says is if you have a packet larger than this PMTU, this pass MTU, then you have a problem. So there are two ways of dealing with that problem. Is first, any router that receives the packet too big to be transmitted can drop the packet and send back an ISMP error packet, which is called packet too big, back to the first client, the transmitter of the packet, basically explaining that the packet is too big and it's up to the end host to deal with that. And in that case, basically, you usually retransmit the packet split in two or more. One of the other solutions, which is feasible only in IPv4, is basically it's up to the router to now fragment the packet. Because it's too big, I will deal with it. I will separate it in smaller packets that I know I can send through the link I'm using. And one of the things, obviously, that IETF has been standardizing is basically the minimum size a link should be able to transmit to be IPv4 or IPv6 compliant. And, well, obviously it grows with IPv6, but this is basically just due to different performance reasons. But if you look more closely at the encapsulation problem is, since you are adding an extra header, if you are already at you have a link with the MTU which is the smallest possible in the sense of IETF RFC as defined, then it means that the packets sent by the host need to be smaller than this minimum. But from a host point of view, there is no reason to get beyond or behind the smallest authorized packet size. So what we have done is basically we just look at, okay, we are using an IPsec gateway in tunnel mode, and basically we have a host sending a packet. So what's happening if actually we are using one of the smallest links possible as defined by IPv4? Well, basically the gateway is just responding to the host that, no, I can't transmit this packet, it's too big. And the gateway knows exactly what it is doing, so it knows exactly the extra room it needs for its header. So it's sending back an ICMP packet too big error message, which is basically saying you need to send a packet smaller than 544 bytes, for example. But the problem is, on the host side, there is no reason why I should get beyond the limit, because that's how basically I should be able to send a packet to the link. And actually, it's kind of in between. Basically, the host is going to basically reply with a packet which is slightly smaller than the minimum MTU, but still larger what can be sent. And this is mainly because of implementation reason. So somebody just decided, well, 552 for Debian is the limit I am going to take. I won't go any behind that. So now the question is, once we have see that, how we can exploit it. So basically, we are going to be just an attacker on the path, and obviously not on the secure path on the LAN, but between gateway in the internet, in the wild, where basically it is deemed to be unsecure. And one of the things we can't do is basically we are going to assert that cryptography behind IPsec is deemed secure. So we won't attack any of the ciphers and so on. So what we actually want to do is just we want to reset basically the gateway pass MTU. And actually it's not that hard to do because basically once you have eavesdrop a packet, which is quite easy through either an infested router, or you can even do that on Wi-Fi. I mean, somebody is using airport Wi-Fi, open Wi-Fi to connect to his company VPN. You can easily do that using the Wi-Fi. And what we want to do is basically forge the correct ICMP packet too big message and send it back to the gateway. And well, IPsec stands for IP security. So it's secure. So actually what it's doing is when you send back an ICMP packet, it checks that it's a legitimate one. And how it does that is basically it's checking at the payload of the ICMP packet. And if the payload contains a genuine encrypted, at least the start of an encrypted packet, then it's deemed to be trusted. So it's quite easy. Once you have eavesdrop, you forge a right ICMP message, and then you send it back to the gateway. And with a single packet, you can actually completely block the gateway and make it think that the actual MTU along the path is less than what it is. So let's give it an example. So we are using an IPsec gateway, which we use the default Debian configuration. And this is an example with a Linux client using the traditional IPv4 mechanisms. So first, you send any IP packet that is going to be encrypted by the gateway. And then, as I said before, the attacker just have to take that packet, forge the ICMP packet too big error message, send it back with the appropriate payload. And what you're actually doing is basically you are putting into the database of the IPsec gateway the fact that for this tunnel, now the MTU has to be the minimum one. And when, after that, a user is just sending a bigger message that what can be sent, it's just replying, no, you need to shrink it or to fragment it to 514, for example. But, as I said earlier in the presentation of the problem, this is not what is doing the end user device, because it should be able to send the minimum MTU. So fortunately, IETF think of this kind of problem, obviously, since it has been around for 25 years, something like that, for IPv4. So they get another pass MTU discovery mechanism. So the first one, which I implicitly presented, is based on this ICMP error message. Basically, you send a packet. If it's too big, you get a response saying, your packet is too big, cut it in half, or send a smaller packet with the actual size that is allowed. So one of the newly introduced pass MTU discovery mechanism is called packetization layer, PMTUD. And basically, it's based on the fact that nowadays, more and more protocol are using acknowledgement, especially, for example, traditional one like TCP. So basically, the idea is, well, if I send a packet and I get an acknowledgement from the remote server or the receiver, it means that this actual size is working for my pass. And because of the implementation of this new discovery mechanism, basically you can shrink it down to less than the actual MTU, because it's implemented in TCP. It's not looking at IP, and it's not necessarily using this the correct value. So now the next question is, okay, now if we enable the PMTUD on the client, how is this working now? Well, our attacker is still going to eavesdrop a packet, and basically send it back to the gateway in the right ICMP error packet. So we are still resetting the pass MTU at the IPsec gateway level. And now what is happening is actually interesting. So the end user device is going to actually send 2 packets from the original first ones, which is not drawn here, but so a bigger packet that can go through the tunnel, and a smaller one. And one of the interesting things is obviously the first one is not going to be sent by the IPsec gateway, but the second one is going to be sent because it's actually a size that can work with the reset we've done. Obviously, on the remote side, you receive the second packet without the first one, so you are going to wait for the first one to arrive, which is actually not going to arrive until you time out 5 times. At which point in time, PLPMD is going to say, okay, I'm sending 2 big packets, I'm going to get back to the smallest side that I can. And because it's TCP based, it will be based on something called MSS, message segment size. So this is the underlying, so in that case, so in the first case, it was a pure denial of service attack where basically you can't do anything after that. When you are using PLPMTD on the client side, suddenly it's no more a DOS, but it's, you have first the timeout to wait for, and secondly, you have major performance issue because suddenly you are going to use very small packets. So what we have done is, so this was the basic work, and now we have extended that. So we have done that with now UDP traffic to see how it goes, because obviously we can't have PLPMTD with UDP. We have worked on IPv6, and we tried what's for Windows and other basically clients, and also the IP-IP tunneling protocol. So these are the results basically we've got. So for the Ubuntu clients, so mainly the 2 main results are basically if you use regular PMTUD with IPv4 or IPv6, you just get the denial of service with that attack. So this is a kind of default configuration everybody has on Ubuntu, for example. And the other major one is, so we have a lot of performance impact using very small packets as opposed to the actual link, what can the link carry. One of the interesting things of that during that experiment is, so for the second result, actually, first I thought it was a denial of service because actually when you have a 6 or almost 7-second freeze when you are doing measurement and when you are a human, or at least now that we have high-speed internet, you basically just say, oh, it's not working. So one day, thanks probably to Cedric, I was going to lunch and I just basically launched one of my tests and I went to lunch. And whilst the other time I was just saying, okay, it's not working, like after 3 or 5 seconds, it's a denial of service. When I get back, I say, oh, actually, it's working. And so just to highlight the fact that now, this kind of initial freeze from a user point of view is actually, you think it's not working at all. So these are the results now for Windows 7. So they can be extended to Windows 10. We've done the measurement with that also. So one of the interesting things is actually Windows try by all means to make the network work, no matter what. So first, what Windows is going to do is, as soon as you have a problem, it's going to reset the don't fragment bit. So the thing that says to the router, oh, you should not fragment the packet, I'm going to do it on my own. So it's going to reset it. And one of the dual behavior that we have witnessed is basically on the IP side, Windows is going to say, okay, now the router are going to send a packet that can be fragmented. But on the TCP side, the TCP layer of the network stack feels, okay, I'm sending packet, everything is fine, they are going to the destination, so I'm going to increase my segment size in TCP. And actually, you are increasing a lot to packets that basically you are going to put stress on the router in the middle of the path to do fragmentation. So, as a conclusion, first, I would summarize that this is quite a highly effective attack. One of the first reasons is basically, as an attacker, you just need to find one packet, send an ICMP error message back, and basically after that, you can just watch. Nothing happened because basically the client and the gateway are going to kind of ping pong between each other, sending packet either too big, and then the gateway saying, oh, your packet is too big, you should send the packet smaller, and the client just not listening to that. It's working on all, at least not all, but most likely on the OSs that we tried, no matter what configuration you have. So it can be either a denial of service, or you can basically just attack the performance. And one of the main problems is there is no good way to deal with the problem. Especially, so we try to, so the highlighted problem that we have is basically tunnel and limit pass MTU value are basically colliding in a way that is not standardized. And one of the reasons why it's not standardized, it's not a trivial problem, because everybody can say, oh, on the client side, I should be able to send that value, but on the gateway side, it's actually, well, I need to add my new header, so how do I deal with that? And the second problem that is highlighted with that work is basically how can we trust an ICMP error message getting back from an untrusted network. And even though IPsec has sanity check to say, okay, is this just a blind attack on my tunnel? No, it's not a blind attack. It's coming from a payload that I have sent and that I can check using the actual cipher, decipher, and check if it's correct. But it can be very easily bypassed. So some countermeasures that are proposed. So the first one is proposed by Cisco, which is quite simple. Ignore the don't fragment bit. So basically, ignore what has been standardized. Yeah, okay, but if you have standard, it's mainly to follow them, right? The second one is basically we can say, okay, on the gateway side, we are just going to ignore everything coming from the untrusted network. But if we have ICMP, it's for a very good reason. And if you have an error message coming back from that, it's for a good reason. And most of the problem is if you do that, you let the client do something like the packetization layer, pass MTU discovery, but the problem is it's not working with everything. So you can't have that working with UDP, for example. So we are basically proposing two countermeasures to be developed. So the first one is basically we may work on the standard side to basically add a new way for gateway to say, okay, I'm going to introduce a new header. So this is a genuine request from the gateway to the client saying, oh, you should actually get smaller because I am a gateway. But the problem is some gateway are just invisible to the user. And they want to stick to that, especially because autonomous systems are encapsulating traffic within their scope. So the second one is actually working on the gateway implementation side. What we can do is basically have between two gateways, so inside the tunnel, the two gateways working together to actually assess the correct pass MTU based on a packetization layer pass MTU mechanism in the same way. So basically it's just a probing scheme where basically you send some probes, you make them as large as possible, and basically when you hit a limit, you say, okay, this is actually what I can send inside my tunnel, and this would basically just nullify this attack because you don't rely anymore on ICMP packet too big messages. It had some constraint or some stress to the network because you are sending more packets, but as your traffic is going, once you have established the actual size, especially nowadays in internet, so it's not the same for like wireless sensor network and so on, but for connection like internet-wide, your path is not changing a lot nowadays. So this is an actual, seems like a good implementation. So, thank you very much for your time.